Rogers Anderson. As we travel around Williamson County today, we're interviewing not a new face to Williamson County, but certainly a new face to a new position in Williamson County. Chad Gray, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Rogers, I'm glad to be here.
So, July 1st is a big day for you.
It is. It is. I'm looking forward to it.
Going to take over all of the administrative, the oversight of all of the election here in Williamson County. And before we really talk about some of the jobs and duties of that, let's find out a little bit about Chad, where he came from. I know you made a reference there a minute ago to the Franklin yearbook, and you're a Page graduate way back when. So bring us where you're born, raised, going to school, and how you settled up here in Williamson County.
Well, Rogers, my family's been here for several generations. I'm a product of a Williamson County school system. I went to Trinity Elementary and Page Middle and Page High School. And I graduated from Page High in 1991. I was class president of my class and came very short of winning student body president when we had those elections.
So you're kind of in those early elections way back there.
So I enjoy the process and look forward to it. I graduated from college at Western Kentucky University in 1996. That was my foray into the Bluegrass State. But I came back home because I love Williamson County, and I've been in the Election Commission office since April of 2000.
Well, over the years, many people that are watching this show will have seen your face or heard your voice on our radio station or in election returns, so you're not new to the office. And for people that may not know this particular job, which Ann Beard has worked very hard over the last several years. She's retiring. I don't blame her at all. Kind of spent a little time left doing what you want to other than getting up every day, working nights and weekends on those election days. But tell us a little bit about the role that you're going to play beginning on July the 1st of 2015.
Well, my position is the Administrator of Elections. I am appointed by the 5-member Williamson County Election Commission that is composed of 3 Republican members and 2 Democratic members.
And I'm going to stop you. Kind of explain why the format is set up that way this year, and it may change again in 3 or 4 more years.
That's true. The Williamson County Election Commission, and every election commission in all 95 counties in Tennessee, is actually chosen by the State Election Commission. But they get recommendations from the members of the Tennessee General Assembly. Now, when the General Assembly is controlled by one party or the other, majority speaking, that party, which in this situation currently is the Republican Party, has the majority of seats in the General Assembly, then they in turn have the majority of the seats on the local election commission. So there are 3 Republicans and 2 Democratic members.
It's interesting to me during this process that you've just gone through to be selected, lots of people would call in and say, explain to me how this works. And people don't realize that at the local level, whether it's myself or the county commission, they really have no input. They may have a little influence. They might could call the election commission member. But as far as voting, that doesn't happen. One of the unusual ways to get appointments and elections that we do here in our state.
It is, and each state varies. It's different in Kentucky. You know, their elections are conducted by their county clerk. It's a division within those offices. But back in I guess around in the 1970s, the election commission was created from the county clerk's office in order to hold elections and be sort of an independent body within county government. To conduct the elections, it's a nonpartisan office for the most part. It's not an elected position. You do see elected administrators in other states as well. So we want to be, part of our oath of office is for us to be impartial in the conducting of elections and the conducting of ourselves and our duties within that office.
The other thing about your office is the uniqueness of it in that the appointments are made by the election members, that five-body board that's appointed from the state of Tennessee, but the actual funding of elections and the actual your salary and all the other salaries, the taxpayers pay for that.
That is correct. We get the funding by way of the Williamson County Commission and in cooperation with you, the county mayor. So we have sort of a unique role in county government, and it's sort of maybe a little bit perplexing for people to see our role within county government because we are a little bit different than most every other department that you'll see.
So you're located in the administrative complex, currently where you get your car tags.
Mm-hmm.
You can almost walk directly across the hall. The same door goes into the election office. Let's talk a little bit about the election processes. Let's talk a little bit about voter registration. How does one sign up? And if they've not voted for one or two times, we call that purging, or do we purge? Let's get into some of those details, because when you think about our county, 49% of the people that live here were not born in our state. Right. So almost half of the population is moving in from a different area, a completely different state. And those that are watching this may think, well, that's different, or that's wrong. The mayor, you're just wrong, or Chad, you're just wrong. So let's set the record straight. How do we register? What age can you register? And what are those processes for early voting all the way down to where you may vote in your individual area?
Well, to register to vote in Tennessee, you have to be at least 18 years old on or before the next election. That means that you could be 18 on election day, but that would require you to register by the voter registration deadline, which is no later than the 29th day before election day. And of course, you have to be a resident of the state of Tennessee, and you have to be a citizen of the United States. And you cannot have been convicted of a felony. And if you have, you can get your rights restored to vote in a certain process. But you can register by mail. You can print forms off our website, or you can always come in person and register that way. Now, some states have started to go to online registration, and that might be coming down the pike for Tennessee here in the future. So many people use internet data, all these electronic devices, and I think it's probably going to be in the future. So that will certainly expedite things, but once you register, you will receive a voter registration card from our office, and that shows that you are registered. And when you go to vote, you do have to show a state of Tennessee or federal issued photo ID when voting. And it's a pretty easy process. Back in the 90s, the state of Tennessee passed early voting. So 20 days before any election, generally speaking, the early voting period begins, and it's a 15-day period, and it ends 5 days before election day. So, and it's been a huge success for our state. It eliminates a lot of problems. It's very convenient for voters to be able to vote during a 15-day period, and then not be, have to vote on election day. So that's been something that's been very good for our state.
Now, when you talk about early voting, we've just finished a city election. We'll have some more city elections in 2015. And oftentimes those early voting sites where you actually go and vote are generally speaking, if they're in the city of Brentwood or the city of Spring Hill or Franklin, most of those early voting sites there will be one in that general area. Mm-hmm. On presidential, gubernatorial, oftentimes those early sites are here at the administrative complex, or as the process picks up steam, we have other areas.
Right.
You could live in Burwood and vote early if you're in that election. Now, certainly if Brentwood's having an election, you live in Burwood, you can't vote. You got to be, that's a city election. But you can come from another part of our county, particularly in a gubernatorial or in a presidential. Oftentimes they're together. Mm-hmm. But you can vote anywhere in early voting. but on the day of the election, you got to go to where you're supposed to vote.
That is correct. That often becomes a point of confusion for our voters. During early voting, any voter is entitled to vote at any early voting site that's
And that
open.
was the purpose of what
Right.
the legislation did back in the 90s.
Exactly. But on election day, we have specific poll books that apply to voters that live in that geographic area. So you have to go to your assigned polling place, and that's where you have to vote on election day. So it can be very confusing to voters, especially if they vote early all the time and then they realize, oh, it's election day and I didn't vote early, and they show up here in Franklin. We've had that happen I don't know how many times since I worked there. Then we have to redirect them to their appropriate polling
Right.
place. And sometimes that voter may have driven past that polling place in order to come to our office. So, but that is how it's set up, and that's how it is designed to work.
So during election processes that, let's just take a different county right now. There's a lot of controversy going on in an adjacent county from Williamson County about not having as many early voting. And of course, there's two reasons for that. Even as successful as early voting has been, you've got some early voting areas that may not have as many people coming out. But somebody's got to pay the poll workers, which we want to talk about in a few moments. You're always needing good poll workers. But someone has to pay the poll workers, and someone has to pay if you have to rent a facility. Now, oftentimes we're able to use schools, but oftentimes we're not. We may have to rent one. Hopefully, though, that there's a church or a school or some place of easy access that has access. But unfortunately, what has happened in election, it's gotten very costly to hold an election. But the whole premises of our society is having a free election so that people have access to the polls. Comments on that?
Well, elections are expensive.
Very.
There's no doubt about that. And early voting has, at times, based on the number of candidates running and whether they have numerous opponents, our election commission has decided to maybe not have early voting in a lot of different areas across the county, maybe because it doesn't seem practical. But by the same token, we're there to serve the voters, and we're providing a service to them. So I think as we move into the future, we're certainly going to be looking at that. But I think since we're providing a service, I think that we should be customer oriented with our voters and try to do early voting as much as we can, but use a practical, economical view of the whole aspect of the voting process.
Chad, as you look in your crystal ball and look down the road, here you are taking over as a young man and got several more years in which to work and be at the helm of the elections here for Williamson County. And here we are, in particularly your generations. I guess you'd be a millennial. You're pretty close to that. Do you see us going into electronic type voting? I know today we can't do that. It's just not in the law. You just can't do it. But could we, at some point, make it more secure, make it in such a way? Are there companies that are looking and exploring, or is there any place in the United States that are trying to do some of this electronic voting to even make it more easy for someone to vote?
Well, I think there are a lot of issues that surround that particular idea of voting online and that sort of thing. I think at the current time that online registration will come down the pike before any online voting.
Sure.
But I know that in government sometimes we're very slow to change, and that's a huge step in the voting process to go to electronic voting. And I think you also have to remember that even in this day and age, not everyone is techno savvy. Now, eventually they will be or have to be, But I think that's sometime down the road. Now, I might be wrong, but in the current atmosphere, I don't see that being very practical anytime soon.
So let's talk a little bit about the electoral processes. Every district, precinct, you label it what you want, has to have so many voters in it. So about every 10 years we do this thing called the census, the population count, the nose count, everyone in Williamson County. And so we get that data, that information of where Chad lives and where Rogers lives, and we put it in this base, and it spits out where everybody lives in Williamson County. And then they start dividing up these lines for people to go vote. And currently in Williamson County we have 12 districts. Now, some people refer to them as civil districts. They're really not.
Right.
There are 12 districts. We have about 202,000 people, nose count. That's all that is. Now, you and I both know people are moving into Williamson County on a daily basis. And they come, they get their card. They have to show that card at early voting, or they show it on the day of elections. So many people are needed to work those polls. So let's first start by how many voting places do we have roughly in our voting districts, and what determines where you go to vote? What determines what area you're going to go to vote in?
Well, we have 41 precincts currently, and that's changed a little bit over the years. We used to have more than that, but during the redistricting that happens every 2 years or 10 years based on the federal census, we try to make the precincts a little bit more balanced population or voter registration wise. We don't really need to have more than 5,000 registered voters at a precinct. So when we have redistricting, we try to balance those precincts out. So we currently have 41. The precincts we actually call the shots on that particular issue. We divide districts up into precincts based on the number of registered voters in a particular geographic area. But there are two entities involved in redistricting, and that's the members of the Tennessee General Assembly and then our county commission. And we have county commission districts, and we have state house and state senate districts that all come into play, and so some of those lines overlap with each other. But we're actually in a pretty good position these days because we're all in one congressional district now. We used to be split between the 4th and the 7th, but most of our district lines are in pretty good shape, and we try to be pretty practical about where those precinct lines are. We use census blocks, and those sometimes are creeks and TVA power lines and that sort of thing. But we try to make them make sense geographically speaking.
Before I forget it, which I'm subject to forgetting things as you get older, let's talk about poll workers. And how does one go about, do you really need poll workers, and how do they make contact? What is the process?
Well, to tell you the truth, we always need poll workers. And without the Election Commission staff and without those hundreds of poll workers that will work under my direction after July the 1st, no one person can do it all. And we have a lot of dedicated poll workers. It's a long day, but they do get paid. Rogers, believe it or not, a lot of people think that come in to vote, they think these are all volunteers. But we do pay them. They get about $100 per day plus $25 for the training class that precedes the day of the election. But so many men, and I know that you've talked to a number of individuals on this program in the community. They fought and died for our privilege to be able to vote. And I think the least that our community can do is to come out on Election Day and support that process that they were able to defend for us during the wars that they fought in. So we love to have poll workers. You can call our office at 615-790-5711, and we'll be glad to send you an application. It's a one-page application. Or you can go on our website at williamsonvotes.net and print an application off off there. But we have 3 big elections next year.
Next year being what year?
It's 2016. It's what a friend of mine in the election process calls the Super Bowl of elections, and that's the presidential election in November of 2016. And we will need lots of workers to pull it off and make it happen.
So if you're watching this show and you want to pick up a little extra spending money and plus a little training, I find that most of the election workers or the poll workers, as a general rule, you see pretty much the same face. They enjoy their time, their camaraderie together. Most of them bring a sandwich, or quite frankly, it looks like a big picnic. But they enjoy meeting, shaking hands with people, and over a period of time, they get to know a lot of the people that come through the doors. Now, I personally want to say thank you to all those poll workers for working on that day. I reckon all of our facilities now are air conditioned, I remember when I was a boy growing up, some of those election places were quite hot.
They were.
But today, it's very much needed in our electoral processes. So if you're watching this show, we encourage you to make contact with Chad's office or call our office, and we will get you in contact. Now, it can't be done the week before an election. It needs to there's a process we do have to go through, but we need lots of people here in Williamson County for holding our elections. So let's go back. You take over on July the 1st. You've got a staff. Let's talk a little bit about your staff. How many you've got in the office? I happen to know personally you're a very small staff, a small area for a large staff. We're trying to address that. As Williamson County continues to grow, we have more people coming in, which means more people with the potential to vote. You've worked with this staff. You've been around this staff. You've just literally grown up in this staff, and challenges and opportunities are always there when that occurs. But I know you're looking forward to working with that staff.
We have a wonderful staff, and we have over 50 years of election experience in our staff, and we've seen it all. And one thing that's good about our staff is that when we see a problem or there's something that needs to be done, we'll chip in as a team and get the work done. We kind of have to wear many hats in that office depending on what day of the week it is and what's going on. But just like any other office, you've got to be prepared, and we do a lot of preparation. We do a lot of management of our 133,000 voter registration records. But yeah, we have a wonderful staff, and as we look to the future, our staff will need to grow as the county grows. Our population is probably going to double in the next 20 years or be close to that number. And so we're going to have some challenges in the future, but I feel confident that we can put the right people in the right place to get the job done.
So Chad, we've got about 4.5 minutes left. I'm sure, as normally, I overlook something that the guest might want to touch on or talk about, and I'll ask you at this time. Now, other than you might want to start having a class on how to tie bow ties for us people in this county that can't tie bow ties. There's 3 or 4 men in this county that I know wear a bow tie very professionally and can tie a bow tie. I'm not one of them, but it does look good. But other than that, I might have overlooked something in our interviewing processes that you'd want to touch upon.
Well, just a quick word about another aspect or function of our office is to give information for potential candidates seeking office in Williamson County or in the Tennessee House of Representatives or the Tennessee State Senate. And running for office is pretty easy in Tennessee.
That's from your side.
From my side. Now, on the other side, there's a lot of work involved, I know. But we try to be so many potential candidates come in, and they really don't know a lot about the process. So we try to educate them as much as possible, and I enjoy interacting with them and so many of them are wanting to serve the community, and that's really really good, and it makes our government successful when people want to participate in that process.
I think that's a great point to point out, that oftentimes the political process is oftentimes through a particular party.
Right.
But we have several elections where they're nonpartisan. They're neither Republican, Democrat, Independent. They're just totally out of the way. Now that doesn't mean they're totally not partisan,
Right.
because we all know how politics works, and there's politics in everything. I came out of the private side. There's plenty of politics in the private side of working, just as they are in politics. But you make an excellent point. If you're looking to or thinking about running for school board, county commission, or so many of the other positions, your office would be where they need to go. Now there's also a whole side is called the appointments that we make. Certainly in your case, it's an appointed position rather than you having to go out there and beat the streets and secure votes. But we have many of those too throughout the county, and so if you've got an interest to serve, if you've got an interest to put back in our county, then I encourage you to contact Chad or call our office, and let us get you in the right path to participating in our wonderful county. Because you touched on something. In the next 20 to 25 years, it's almost unbelievable to think about, but we're supposed to have a doubling, going from about 202,000 to about 400,000 people by the year 2040. Now you'll still be around working, I won't, but somebody's got to deal with those issues of where all those people live and where all those people work, and certainly where they vote. Got 1 minute left. I want to ask you this. I know we've not touched on Miss Ann, but she's going to enjoy life, but she's done a great job.
She has, and she's been an employee in county government for almost 45 years.
Long time.
She worked in the circuit court clerk's office, worked for former General Sessions Judge Jane Franks, and then became the election administrator in 1998. And she's managed the office well. Back in I guess it was in November of 2004, our county had the highest turnout in the state in voter participation in that presidential election. And we've managed well under her leadership, and we'll certainly miss her. I think I'm going to probably try to recruit her to be a poll official before long. She'll be drafted into that, hopefully. But we look forward to sending her off here in the near future, and we're excited about the prospects of her getting to do what she wants to do for a change. So.
And I will amen that. And thank you for all your service and what you've done. Chad, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard in just a different hat.
That's correct.
I'm Rogers Anderson, Williamson County Mayor. We'll see you around the county at the next time, at the next show. Have a good day.